2, 1. Welcome, everybody, to this latest Values Jam deep dive conversation. It's the first of 2023, and we've got the wonderful and important topic of education. I'm delighted to be joined by Fabienne Vales to introduce the topic, and I'm going to hand over to her straight away. Fabienne.
Wonderful. So lovely to see you all. My invitation before I say anything about education is for actually to come and arrive into this room, this Zoom sort of room. I don't know what you've done all day, but I know that I've been teaching, and the transition between teaching home and being here. I just feel it requires at least about a minute for us to just be witness and to hold the space in just a minute of, seeing who is here. Just looking at the lovely faces of the lovely people we have here, and then we'll obviously get started. So if that's okay with you, we'll just do that 1 minute of just being here and arriving in the room. Wonderful. So thank you for allowing for this space. I'm just going to briefly, just 1 minute, and then I'll just open the space for all of us. Share briefly who I am. So I know some of you may not know who I am. So I'm Fabienne. I call myself a reform mum and teacher. I have, I guess I would say, been on a real transformation over the last two years mainly, and became a completely different, had a different approach to parenting and to teaching. But most importantly, my passion is well-being, or lack thereof, in education, and I call that flourishing. And the witnessing of so many teachers and young people who are in survival rather than flourishing, and so this is where my research has taken me. And really the question I want to begin with for all of us is, how do we all come together in education so all can flourish? And by that I mean young people, I mean educators, I mean the adults, the parents, the guardianers, as Alan and I have named them, all the people, the adults in the life of young people, because what I believe is we have a tendency to focus on individual well-being, so what the individual can do to look after themselves and to look after their well-being, but very often we do not discuss the other elements, the environment and the impact that the environment and the culture of the institution and where the institution is based, so the country it's in, that's hardly ever mentioned. And that's really what interests me, is how do we all bring all of that and create more community well-being. So on that note, I would really love your thoughts, your comments, you're on mute, Alan.
Let me share the Values Jam vibe, and you're probably going to be cogitating around what Fabienne has just said. And then when I've explained the Values Jam vibe, I'll just ask Fabienne to ask that question one more time, and then we'll start. So I'm going to share my screen briefly. And so this is the Values Jam that we're doing today, education. The card game is playful. It's about creating harmony all over the world through values-led conversations, and there's just a bit about our values. But this is the bit that's important for us this evening or this morning, depending on where you are. And what I'd like us to do, please, is take it in turn to read a statement and to listen to other people reading the statement so that we get a sense of how this thing works. It's based on work by a guy called David Bohm and his Bohm dialogue. And the key differences I explained earlier to a normal conversation is that we don't respond to each other. So imagine that a comment is detached from where it came. And when you're making a comment, it's detached from you. We don't have a one-to-one discussion. We just develop the group dialogue and conversation. So I'll start top left, and then if we can work across to the right and then down a line and across to the right again. I won't give any order. Let's just see where we go. So we shape our judgments and assumptions with the spirit of being in the same band. We treat people as they would like to be treated.
I'll jump in and take the next one. In a Values Jam, everybody wins. No one likes a lead guitarist, hogging the stage for too long.
Tune in that an opinion is an assumption. It is important to see that different opinions that you have are the result of past thought.
Go, Rebecca, go.
A Values Jam is creative. Have fun, be playful, anything goes, give it a try.
Be non-judgmental.
There is no speaking at each other. We are one band.
It isn't necessary that everybody be convinced to have the same view. We value difference over vanilla, except in ice cream.
Be curious for new insights and reflections to help us learn and grow.
We share thoughts and opinions in a positive spirit without hostility.
Ask questions to understand.
Listen, listen, listen to the rhythm developing.
We practice suspending our assumptions.
We co-create something new together.
Be relaxed.
Be aware of the subtle fear and pleasure sensations that block our ability to listen freely.
We detach the words from the person.
Each values jammer joins in. Flow with the whole meaning of the group and play your part in finding a way for everyone to join in. No one is left out.
Be relaxed.
We test traditional thinking and perceptions.
We share those long-lost memories or experiences that cross your mind.
Beautiful.
Great. So take that in. And now, Fabienne, please, the question.
The question is, how do we all come together? So in education, obviously, because we're talking about education today specifically, so all can flourish.
we need to create a vision that we can all share. And I think that would be a good first step.
Strikes me that we need to find a vehicle or platform to accommodate all of these different people and stakeholders to be able to communicate with each other and understand the whole picture.
We need to relate with each other.
We need to create an atmosphere of complete love towards each other and the vision.
I think we also have to remember that education is a mission, and that that success isn't necessarily quantifiable immediately.
And for me as a linguist, I automatically want to go to what do we mean by success? And what do we mean by all those words that we have a tendency to use, like education, like, you know, because they become these things that we all believe we all share, like, but we haven't got a common definition. So, you know, a bit like what Prab was saying, I think it's that vision needs to come with a definition, a common shared definition and vision. I guess that's what I would say.
I feel like we need to embrace the and. So if someone talks about technology, it's not the be all and end all, but there's an and there's a community, and there's all sorts of things, and not just put ourselves into one corner, one hang our coat on one hook.
The definition of or derivation of educate I saw as educare and educare. And it's the second term that really fascinates me, because it's all about bringing out from within. So it's all within us. And I find that really fascinating. This is why I added the aspects of love and kind of a great atmosphere that Values Jam create in order to bring it out, certainly for discussion to begin with.
Just now, when somebody said about not hanging everything on one hook, I was thinking in a similar space, in that we should celebrate difference and allow it to flourish, rather than try and jam it into this kind of way that has to work somehow. I'm not sure what that looks like.
Bringing out from within, but also bringing in from the outside. So listen to the rhythm.
And reflecting that diversity, right? Because look at tonight, we from, you know, all different areas across the world, and the importance of that emergence within that culture, what it looks like in one. culture might look different from another. I think that's also particularly close to my heart.
And connected to that, it strikes me that over the last couple of years, we've learned that we're not as dependent on time and place as we previously thought we were. You know, so schooling was delivered in one place at a given time by one person to another group of people. And just this session that we're having now proves that that's no longer the case. So what opportunities does that provide for education?
To follow up on that, Alan, I think we also learn the degree to which we didn't understand our support structures and how much we rely on people we so automatically saw because we worked in the same places and were at the same places at the same times. And so I've been trying to develop sort of consciously when I need to reach out for support of one kind or another. And I'm not always a natural at asking for help. So that's also a lesson in sort of ongoing humility.
Nice. I think self-reflection is the beginning, because then if you look at yourself and you know what you are good at and what you're not good at, then you have also a better view on who you can help or who can help you. And that is bringing people together. They start dancing together.
So really an important aspect of education is starting with oneself, to really begin to know oneself inside out. And values goes a long way in helping that. It's one language, but we need a language, a positive language.
Someone shared with me on the podcast the word inner standing. And I really love that word. I really, to describe just that, the inner standing, to get that understanding. Yeah.
And understanding means listening. And I really loved how this session started. It started with listening. So I have to listen to myself, I find. And that's as much about a feeling. It's not chatter in the head. It's really getting to a source of a feeling inside me, checking in. What's the feeling? Where is it? How does it feel, this feeling? And so on.
Maybe we can use observation of all your senses instead of listening. I don't know, just an idea.
Missed the middle of that there.
Donia, did you want that repeated?
If you don't mind, it's just a little bit at the end. I sometimes miss with Eveline. I'm sorry, Eveline. Is that better, Eveline?
Okay. Now, what I wanted to say, maybe the use of the word observation with all your senses is maybe better than listening. I'm thinking that. So because you said about feeling and observation with all your senses, hearing and seeing and feeling, and a lot more than just listening with your ears. That's what I wanted.
Thank you.
It's really struck me that this, the way this conversation has moved to looking within and an understanding of ourselves and using all of our senses to do that is a description that I can't associate with in any way with my education, because I was a unit being processed and being factory fed with stuff to be able to churn out a result. And that difference, that stark difference, has really struck me.
I was just about to offer up a quotation from a presentation I recently saw by a lady from Texas named Dr. Laura Rendon. And the thing that stuck out for me was our default language for students is one of limitation and restriction rather than empowerment and expectation. And I think that's what you're getting at. I think we were all expected to conform to an educational system that is an artifact of the early industrial age, rather than what's really pitched to prepare students for whatever is coming.
Too much structure. And structure, yeah, it's a balance between structure and chaos. That's something I always say. And chaos is the human relations between each other. And you need to find a balance, because without any structure, you cannot go anywhere. But overstructuring, you will kill all the relations and humanity between people. So we need to refine the balance.
It's a dance, isn't it? It's that delicate dance. It's like dancing. To dance with a partner, you need to wait until, you know, one of you might be taking the first step and then you follow, and, you know, like that observation, right? And being in the space. But to me, it also requires one thing that's really important and that really sensed tonight compared to my rhythm today in the school is this is so much slower, and I feel so much more present, and that is a big difference. Is that very often in my day when I teach, I'm being encouraged to go fast, you know, like next thing, instead of starting a session, you know, like with the students and so with the learners going, let's be in this room like we did, right? I don't do that, and I don't know why I don't do that with my learners. Maybe I'll do that tomorrow morning when I start.
Perhaps it's useful for all of us, I know for me, to realize that speed is a choice. It's a choice in every moment.
The description of dance I've just been thinking about, and I can see a dance hall, and I can see people doing different dances together, and it makes me think that unless some care and attention is given to helping people to understand what's going on around them, it could be a messy disaster. And so it's made me wonder how you create an environment where all of these different people doing different dances together can coexist and feel comfortable with that and not collide with each other. Maybe it's a bit of a stretch as a metaphor, but it works at some levels for me.
It's a wonderful metaphor, and maybe one we should all ask ourselves right now. What dance am I dancing right now? You know, what's the rhythm? What's the dance? And maybe we all share our dance. But also, I think not just what's the dance I'm dancing right now, but what's the dance I want to be dancing? Am I a victim of the red shoes? You know the story, the ballet story of the red shoes. I feel caught up in one dance, and my favorite dance is another one completely.
And sometimes on a same music, but with a different level of energy, you dance different, and you dance alone or you dance together with somebody else or with a group together. So but yeah, you need also not to clash against other dancers. You need a certain respect for each other also. Yes. Yeah.
Still relating all of this to education and some of the dialogue that's been about change in education. this metaphor is appropriate, where different people are dancing with different degrees, and those with energy come up and those with less energy stay down. In chemistry, Brownian motion comes to my mind. But I feel, just going back to the other metaphor, where we all move at different speed. The river flows faster in the middle than at the edges, and the education reform that we talk about could become such a huge disruptive exercise if it was to be done for the whole of the system. And I think what is happening at the moment, where people are doing lots and lots of different experiments and strands of education which are working, it's just, at the moment, I find that it is there for those who want to participate, but it also leaves behind a large section of pupils whose parents may not be privileged to come out and help them. And so when this whole system changes, there could be some winners and some losers, is how I feel. We're going to move in a way that will allow us all to move positively, some at different speed. But I mean, this is just my thought. I don't understand the whole education field that well, but I do go into schools for a variety of reasons.
But if teachers support self-reflection with students, with learners, at every age and every social background, I think there may be another, after a while, there will be maybe another exclusion, people who doesn't, or have difficulties with self-reflection and with a certain abstraction.
And that last comment's made me wonder whether the students are actually the people that need most education, or is it the parents?
Or what about the teachers?
Yeah.
Well, I think we're all teachers, and we're all students. And maybe to come back to the original question, nice focalizing gift is that maybe to flourish, there's a sense of equality, in the sense of we can all learn from each other and we can all teach each other. And therefore the role of the educator is maybe the alchemist.
And there's a recognition that we don't all flourish at the same time, and that it's a little bit, again, and I use metaphors a lot. I apologize. That's how my brain works. Pictures. I'm sorry if it doesn't work for you guys, but it's this idea of surfing a wave. So, if you look at a surfer, sometimes they're flat, just waiting for the next wave, right? Plodding along, and then others will be surfing that wave for 90 seconds, and others will be under the water holding their breath. And when you look at it, if you look at the surfer who's surfing beautifully, which is what social media does for our young people, then it creates this idea that everybody's surfing the wave, but none of the others are happening in the process. And I think that is such an important to be part of that conversation, because we all, it's a fluctuation, it's a continuum, and it'll vary. And it's like, for me, it's how do we all come together to not only support when we are under the water holding our breath, but also like celebrating when we truly surfing the wave and being really awesome at what we're doing, right? That, for me, that's what flourishing looks like.
I'm curious about when you're sort of, at social media for young people, it made me think about how young people are actually involved and participating in the conversations about education reform and change. In all the conversations I've had with young people, they know exactly what they want and exactly what's good for them. And there is an intuition and a real sense of, like, I don't know, something that really actually matches the research out there about what is good learning and how they might want school and learning opportunities to be. And it's really difficult when their voices aren't necessarily heard. And that many adults are telling them that it isn't possible when it is. And sometimes I just do wonder what would happen if we empowered our young people with the knowledge and some of the backup of the knowledge that we know, the research, the things like this. I sometimes think about what Extinct Rebellion has done in terms of just exposing stuff. There was Education Rebellion, and we just put a lot of more information into our young people's hands, and it's a difficult tension for me because I don't want to manipulate it, because that can also be used in a manipulative way, and that sort of thing. But when we started talking to our children about education and whatever, and they were able to question, why were we doing this and what's the purpose of this, they very much saw sometimes the excellence in what they were doing and sometimes the futility in what they were doing. And so very much, if we actually believe really in the power of young people, which many educators do, and we want a system where we are guided, where there is student agency, then how do we honestly support systems change with young people in partnership versus in top-down approaches, and how do we do that quickly, because actually they can adapt, they know where it's at much more than many of the adults who are there. And that's not to negate this importance of adult presence and guidance. I'm not saying, again, it's an and, but yeah.
There's an author named Mark Perna who wrote a book called The Why Generation. And he talks about how for most of us at our ages, if we asked a teacher or a head of school why we were being asked to do something, it was treated as resistance or rebellion. And in fact, it was probably intended that way. But that basically people under 30 need to know why they're doing something. And with an adequate explanation of why, they usually get on board. And we've applied that in my school. I'm the principal of a secondary school. I have 500 teenagers. And it's had a remarkable impact. The kids have begun to believe that we're doing things for reasons rather than simply arbitrarily. And in the rare occasion, an emergency where we need kids to snap to, they're that much more willing to snap to because they know we'll explain it when there's time. On the other hand, I'm probably going to have to leave a bit early because we have an impending drug bust. So I also want to echo the comments about the necessity of structure. We finally found out who's driving onto campus at lunchtime and delivering fresh vaping cartridges. So.
I'd love to know more before you go in terms of how you manage to encourage the why question within the educator, even before they had a student directing that question toward them. But even in the curriculum design, what age group have you experience of, and how can you share some methodology?
I can try. That's the second time you've brought up the likelihood of resistance from teachers rather than students. And it's far easier for me to manage my 500 kids than my 3 dozen teachers. I'm in my 9th year as head of the school, and so I'm I have the privilege of being able to lead with to neck rein, if you ride horses, where if when a rider knows and the horse know each other, you can turn the horse by simply laying the reins across the neck, and the horse will gently turn. Now that's not good. I was recently in the hills and came around a bend, and there was a rattlesnake in the path, and at that point I did the yank the reins. But so we're modeling this in faculty meetings and with students. I did mandate that our teachers begin each lesson with a review of the standards being addressed and how it connects to prior learning and where they're headed in the unit. Beyond that, I don't think I have much of an answer. I think it's a cultural thing more than a technique. But as we began to recognize that this was working with most of the kids, a lot of the teachers have gotten on board just because it works. But this goes to all sorts of things in education. We have the teachers in every school who think rigor means a lot of students fail the course instead of what rigor really should mean. So I think that there are just huge changes as we move out of this industrial model of education towards whatever we're headed to, that it has to be more individuated. And that requires opening up, and it means that I have a lot less. I teach at Arizona State University in the leadership preparation program, and I try to teach my graduate students that power is influence, not control. And we try to push the same lessons with teachers in terms of classroom management. Sorry, that was a really long answer, but.
I wanted to just quickly jump on the word rigor, and a friend of mine who I very much respect in education is like rigor mortis, and he uses the word vigor. And when
That's nice.
You change rigor to vigor, it changes the whole game.
That's really interesting, actually.
And as a linguist, I'm going to come in again and go, that's because we're using words, and then they mean so many different things, right? It's like the minute I hear words like rigor, I feel, you're saying, I feel my body just go get really tensed. And I think there's some words that do just that sort of like become almost institutionalized. And so it's part of, like you were saying, a bit like part of the culture, and having those conversations to actually both discuss what we mean but also challenge and creating new words. I'm all for creating new words. Maybe that's what we need brand new words for the new system post industrialization, and creating a new system like standing and some of the other words that I've heard other people sort of create and share.
Go back to the why question. What I do with my students, but I'm teaching at the University of Applied Science, so they are older, is after every lesson, I ask to think themselves. They don't have to say it, they can say it, they're not obliged to say it. What 3 new concepts that they learn, 2 new insights, and 1 thing that will they change in their life because of the things they see. And then I ask, what are your concerns? And if something is not clear why they have to learn it, they will ask it. And now I see, after I did this a long time, that students are much more open. They ask more questions and they see why they learn things. So that's a nice one.
I've been reflecting on the comment about language, and language I think is we don't really appreciate the power of language, and often in this situation that power might be very negative. And it reminds me of a story from not from education, it's from customer service, and it was a train company, and they were experiencing very poor customer service. And so when they investigated it, they discovered that the frontline service staff of the rail company were calling the passengers human freight. That was the term that was used to talk about passengers. And surprise, surprise, the service was rubbish. And so this has really struck me that, you know, I think the suggestion of a new vocabulary for education could be wonderful.
It's quite human freight. Wow. In thinking, so when I think about the systems change triangle and about how that speaks very much to the mindset right at the bottom. You've got to change the mindsets if you're going to change the structures, then to change the outcomes. And as you sort of said with human freight, and I was thinking very much, anyway, what's our mindset or concept about children and about young people, about their place, about their power, about their agency, about who's in charge, about our relationship with them, and all sorts. And I think and what they're able to do, and sometimes a lot of fear around control and all of those sorts of things. So I was just thinking, when even, I mean, children is a fine word, or young people or student or whatever, but how even do our huge sort of the concepts or the ideas that we have are so weighty on what that means and what that means within our own contexts. And even then, is there a better or a different word, or is it just a sort of mindset change around who those, our relationship with those young people, in order to then change everything else sort of up the system?
I think it's a great point, and it's Glenn, I'm not. Oh yeah, you have Formula One racing over there, and there's a guy called Max Verstappen who is now frequently on the podium, finishing in the first three. I remember the first time that he finished on the podium, he was 16 years old, but nobody said, you're too young to drive a Formula One car, right? Well, maybe some people did, but he got through that. And so it is this thing about, do we really understand the potential of people at that age and give them what they can do, rather than corral them through this kind of really clunky system that is for the benefit of the ease of management of the system, not for the people going through it.
Well, this is back to that idea of ordered liberty, the idea of having to have space for entrepreneurial activity and still have the overall structure. So sure, in any classroom, a teacher who can do individuated instruction and guide the students towards mastery in multiple forms of assessment, that's all brilliant. But at the same time, we're spending hundreds of billions of dollars or pounds or euros on these, and we also have to make sure that there is, however we measure it, value for the spending. We have so that's a really difficult call. One of the things we work with teachers is that going into your classroom and delivering your lesson really, really well does not necessarily constitute teaching. If learning doesn't occur, then you haven't actually taught, no matter how well you've performed the math. But on the other hand, we also have to remember, as we try to hold teachers responsible, that at least half of the job of learning has to be on the student's part. So I'm actually going to be at the state legislature tomorrow talking about standardized testing. and just how incredibly profoundly stupid it is as a way to evaluate schools and teachers and students. And I will make absolutely no progress. But this is this big giant mess.
And there's one group we haven't mentioned. We've mentioned the learners, the young people, the children, and the teachers, but the parents have such an important role, in my opinion, because I see like how the parents view those standardized tests and how they actually encourage their children to you have to revise, you have to do all this hard work. And for me, education is also involves also the carers, so not just parents, but the carers, the guardians, because they first of all, they play such an important part in the formative years, the 0 to 2 or 3, when the children, in some countries, they don't go to school until they're 7, right? So they actually stay with the primary carer, and that, I think, is also part of the conversation that has to happen. And like the reason I call myself a reform mother, is because my eldest looked at me and said, "You talk about flourishing all the time. I'm telling you, I don't like school. I don't want to go back to school post-COVID. So you're talking about all those lovely things about flourishing students. What happens when it's your son?"
And right there, you mentioned COVID. And as we're tracking the impact of learning loss from the pandemic, we tracked it. We began tracking it against early performance. And students who arrive in kindergarten knowing their letters and their numbers, and students who were by for 2nd, 3rd grade, they're fine. It's the students who arrived in kindergarten not even sure of their last name or their address, and who didn't really master the fundamentals of reading until 3rd or 4th grade. Those kids are not doing well, and the primary difference, the primary variable in those two groups of kids is exactly what you're talking about. It's the parents, it's the home environment, it's the value that's placed on educational attainment in their personal lives before they come to us. Yeah. And so it's how bent the lumber is that we're supposed to produce fine furniture out of. If that's not too harsh and too similar to human freight. But I talk about my school as a fine furniture factory sometimes.
I really enjoyed reading sorry, go Evelyn. Just with the standardized testing, I really enjoyed reading The End of Average, which I don't know how many people have done that here, but like it talked about how standardization grew and how the idea of average in the first part was actually a really beautiful idea. It would be the ideal person and the ideal measurement and stuff, because that would be the epitome of what that was. Whereas now the idea of average is terrible, and once you could then measure what sort of average was, that allowed you to then measure against average to see who was better and who was worse, and how that kind of came about. And then actually the whole concept itself is a bit ridiculous. And then how might we then, whether that's in business or in schools, drop that or whatever. I recommend it as it was a nice, good, challenging notion.
Can you put it in the chat, Rebecca?
Sure.
Is that all right? Thank you.
While you're doing that, I'm conscious that what I'm about to say might not be appropriate. So if it is offensive, I apologize in advance. It's relevant to the topic of average. And it's this, that on average in the world, everybody has one breast and one testicle.
Well, it was inappropriate.
Who is an educator? I would say parents are the most important and caregivers, primary caregivers, are the first and most important educators. And no one passes an exam or gets a degree on that, but it's most important. And, you know, I take a little bit of comfort and in just always thinking it takes a whole community to raise a child in a wholesome way. And therefore, everyone in the community is a contributing educator. And this is where values can be so helpful, because it's through, they say values cannot be taught. They can only be caught. and so the way I live my life, and I can be a sample and an example, for me, that's the ultimate education I would hope to give to another being. And not pass it on to whoever meets them at the school gates. And, you know.
And I heard someone say it takes a child to raise a village. And I quite like that.
It's a collaborative project.
Good luck, Glenn.
Yes, my adventure is starting. So thank you. I look forward to the next one of these.
See you later.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that collaborative is definitely it, I think, for me. That's of the exchange, right? Like the being changed through the conversations, through the interactions every single time.
I feel like the conversation has come back to, I think, something that Prabodh said right at the beginning, but just about love. So we've got the community bringing up, you know, the community raising a child. We've got the, you know, what the home environment is, about all of those sorts of things. And yeah, I've just finished reading the bell hooks all about love, and it's just such an interesting treatise. And we don't talk about love very much in education, and definitely not in the UK where I'm from. It would not be an appropriate word to bring up in education. And yet an ethic of love and what that means for the inner, for the outer, for the community, for our care, and all of those sorts of things. I think I'm interested to see whether the language of love actually makes its way more into education, more mainstream, because of our greater acceptance and of understanding and a broadening of a definition around that, and how important that is for our young people.
I think that describes sentiment, and I guess echoing what you were saying earlier, Rebecca, about and there's something else about the more technical elements of raising a child or bringing up a child, and we're left to it. Nobody gives us anything in the way of hints and tips and lessons about how to raise a child, and yet it's probably the most important role we perform. So how stupid is that?
You even have to pass a test to drive a car.
Yeah.
I said that to my midwife when I gave birth to my first, and I just said, so you've given me these books telling me what my child looks like as it grows and turns from a prawn to this beautiful baby, or prawn looking like sort of being to this beautiful baby. Now what? Like,
But
off you go.
but it's typical because of all the society. It's all linear thinking and outcomes and push methods, like the conditioning we use, and instead we forget the relational cognition. We forget the pull, the engage the people, not only students but also the parents, or all the stakeholders within the system. And that's such a pity, because that's just the little bit of chaos who makes it magical. Or no, it was not magical. It was, what did you say, Donia, before? You didn't say the magician, but I don't.
Alchemist.
Yeah, the alchemist. Voilà. Thank you.
So it's been a fascinating kind of meandering dialogue this evening, and if we now move it on a bit, what we're going to do before we say goodbye is think about and share what we are encouraged to do differently as a result of the session today. But before we do that, for this next piece, it'd be really interesting to hear people's kind of what's a big takeaway that I've taken from the conversation, and for us to just play with those contributions for a bit before we draw the thing to a close. So what's your big takeaway from today?
I could start.
Thank you, Tonya.
Very affirming that the word love needs to be used more in education. I'm aiming to start, I don't know if the word is campaign, but inspiration maybe, something called On Tuesday, Education Day, which I'm calling it caring rather than love, because that might be too scary or too, extreme for some people. But to encourage caring on campuses. And I'm so encouraged that, this gathering is saying we need to articulate it and put it out there a lot more. And it takes many forms, love. It is absolute, that concern for the growth and the development and the flourishing of every individual. So it's not specifically directed to any specific group, whether it's student, whether it's teacher, whether it's vice chancellor or janitor. It's about caring and that language of love in action. And so that's my takeaway, that, if educators in this gathering are using the word love, then maybe there's encouragement there.
Thanks, Tonya.
The one I associate strongly as complementary to love is integrity and honesty for all concerned, because whereas one is a yardstick by which we measure our performance with honesty, the other is the glue. The love is the glue, in my opinion, and both are needed to build what we are trying to do with little sticks, which is all we can carry at a time. So as we stack, we need both of those: right material, right glue.
Thanks, Prav. Rebecca, takeaway?
I'm enjoying the fact that I'm with now 5, previously 6 or 7 people that I've never met before, but that are all passionate about reform in education, and just, I think sometimes it's easy to think that there aren't that many people out there, but I think there are a lot more. And how do we keep connecting with each other to energize and to learn, and how important that is. That's kind of part of the self-care of educators, is connecting and energizing. Yeah, and I like what Fabian said about being a reformed parent. Oh my goodness, it's so hard. With your own children going through an education system and ranting and raving about education. So I appreciate connecting on that one too.
Okay, first of all, what I take away is the way how we jam. I like the methods, and I like to try it once also with my students. And another thing, there are a few things, and I really like the word understanding. I will take that with me because it really touched me, and it's something I feel. And another thing that I want to look closer to is indeed the influence of the words we use within the context. That's something I want to dive deeper into. Thank you.
Fabienne, what about you?
There's so much, so much that I've taken from this conversation. So definitely the love piece, because I think that's the biggest thing that I can't quite tally, and I've noticed with like the way I am as a teacher in a setting, and the way I am at home as a mother, or when I, because my eldest is now home educated, the way I behave at the dojo with the other home educated kids, my behavior is not the same. And I definitely, that's generated a bit of an interest. I'm going to pay more attention, observe more what's going on in the different settings. But I guess the biggest takeaway for me is this dance. It's I keep going back to that sort of like middle way, like the harmony. It's like, how do we keep the harmony? Like, people might call that balance. But when you want to dance, there's a moment in where your body is almost in, is literally not quite, yeah. And so it's that what we're talking about, the structure versus the no structure and freedom, the control versus like all those concepts. And with the love, I'm reminded of Martin Luther King Jr.'s quote, which you probably all know, but the love without power is anemic and sentimental, and power without love is reckless and abusive. And this, how do we do the love power? What does that look like? Because I think, to me, that that's a very interesting question to ponder on.
Thanks, Fabienne. And mine is not dissimilar from yours. It's this language thing. It's what difference could it make if we just started with a blank sheet and asked ourselves the questions: what words and phrases would support us getting to the end game compared to the language that is used traditionally, and then other things as well, but that I think is the standout one for me. So to wrap up then, somebody mentioned it's Education Day on the 21st, isn't it? So it would be really great to hear, what is it that you're encouraged to do, that you can do in the next 2 days in honor of Education Day, as a result of our discussion, your key takeaway, because imagine if the 6 of us do some small thing in the world connected to this, and then the ripple impact that might have potentially in the world. So who would like to kick off here? Donya was brave enough last time, but it could be somebody else this time.
oh, I'm going to ask much more why. And trigger people. Let them think, let them reflect.
And Evelyn, if I can just ask you to be a bit more concrete with that, when are you going to have the opportunity to do that?
Okay. So, for example, tomorrow I'm also an entrepreneur. So tomorrow I have some conversation with prospects, and it are companies, but people who are responsible there for learning, because lifelong learning. And I'm going to ask much more why questions, why, and also I'm going to look already which kind of language they use, and ask also why.
Great, thank you.
Yeah. And if I have the time, I will write something on social media, but I cannot promise that because it's so busy, but that would be nice also.
Okay.
I'm knee deep in pitching or like putting down ideas on paper for hopefully a new school and things. So I'm doing, my whole world is education day at this moment in time, and just connecting with lots of people. But I think as I put it down, I think the language one, I'm struggling to get everything from my head onto paper with the right kind of language and stuff. But I think I'm going to be bold. I'm going to put love right in there.
Brilliant.
I'll come in and I'll share mine tomorrow morning when I start my year 9 class. I'm going to start with arriving in the room like I've done today. So approach it rather than doing register to see who's here. That's what I'm going to do, just to have a different approach and notice the observing, like my personal behavior in a more traditional setting, and how I show up and how different that is from, how I show up at home and with the home educators, and challenge that behavior. Why is it I'm a different person? Because I know I am. And challenge that and show up more with love. Like you, Rebecca, I'll be bold in a very, very traditional British organization. So that's good. We'll see how that goes.
I think it was Donia who mentioned values cannot be taught but caught. Is it you, Donia?
Yeah, it was.
Yes. I'm currently going into schools to help those who have fallen behind and are taking exams in June in maths. I'm kind of giving them a hand. And something else I've been thinking doing in the same school and maybe one or two other schools surrounding is going to talk about values in PSHE class, perhaps. And I'd like to devise something around this idea that values cannot be taught but caught. So if I could devise a games that I could conduct with them, yes, something like that. Yes, Alan. I've actually been placing your cards.
Your cards?
No, yes, my cards on a grid to say, where do I put these values on my love versus truth grid? With my, 2 children, grown up ones. So it'll be nice to devise something around that, because it's catchy, not taught but called. I quite like that, and it's true. Once children are above certain age, you cannot tell them about values. You've got to bring them out in a different way, because I mean, my interaction with my children when they were teenagers was that they felt they knew better than I, and so the dialogue had to be on a level playing field. Yes, I'm learning, but so should they. So games and so on was always a good thing, but yeah, quite like that, Donya. I'll remember you for that. Let's catch values.
And Donya, what about you? What are you encouraged to do?
Make them like butterflies, catch them. Yeah. Dance, but not the clog dance. Be light. Let magic happen. Be the dance of my choice, my tune, not someone else's beating the drum, and I have to keep in time with that. And then that allows everyone else to dance their dance.
And it sounds like your project is a brilliant vehicle for that.
Well, we shall see. Yeah.
Mine's quite a simple one. Last year I started a Values Jam guest session series. I did one a month, but they were so brilliant that one of my New Year's resolutions this year was to publish one a week. So that's what I've set out to do. And the other day in a conversation, I was just speculating about how a values jam would go with young people. So, and I'm talking, sort of from 7, maybe up to 16, something like that sort of range. And so this conversation has encouraged me to start inviting people and asking people about the possibility to run values jam sessions with those young people. And I don't know what that's going to look like, but I can see, 8-year-olds talking about love. What does that mean? Rebecca, you were going to say something.
Yeah, I know. I don't know if I'm interrupting the rules of the values jam. Do you know philosophy for children?
No.
Okay, so philosophy for children is basically values jam for kids. It's taught beautifully in many schools, and it's done amazingly. And one of the best practitioners of it, who started it within the UK and leads beautiful teacher training in it, is in Beckton in East London. But there's lots of stuff that you can find on it, and if you want to connect about it. But basically, philosophy for children is values jam for kids. And it's amazing. And I've seen it's a practice, and it's a means. I tried it when I was in secondary school, but like I have seen 7 and 8-year-olds sat around discussing whether there is a God, what the meaning of love is, the meaning of life, like in stuff that you're just blown away by, and in a manner and a means and a way of discussing that is just pure joy and love to watch. Like it's an incredible practice, and for all the inquiry-based learning and all the things that you want for the kids, it is beautiful. So yeah.
Is there somebody that you know that I could speak to about this?
Yeah.
All right, cool. I'll be in touch then.
Okay,
so sorry, Prab, go ahead.
Yeah, just a question to Rebecca. Would that be linked to an organization called this Philosophy for Children or something like that? There is something local where I am. Somebody works for that in Oxfordshire.
Yeah.
Do you know the organization name? It's got philosophy and young or children.
Yeah, it's philosophy for children, and I think the 4 is the number 4 rather than that. But yeah, it originated way back when, and with the starter school was in Beckton. But then they do all sorts of teacher training, and the training you can do level 1, level 2, level whatever. But I think it's some of the best professional development I've ever had, and the best when I was head of a primary school, the best professional development. My teachers just loved it. It was fantastic. So,
oh, very good. Well, what a brilliant, optimistic note to end our Values Jam deep dive on. And thank you so much, everybody, for joining. Some of you I knew, most of the people at the beginning I didn't know at all, and some just know. So it's been just been a great conversation. So thank you very much. And Fabienne, thanks very much indeed for introducing the topic and setting us off on the right path with your introduction.
Thank you. I've really enjoyed it.
Have a good evening, everybody.
thanks everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.